Welcome to the third part of our BlockPlay training resource. We're going to be looking in this part at the role of the adult in setting up the block area, in providing accessories for BlockPlay, and in supporting children with risk assessment. So Tina Bruce talks about the role of the adult as being really important. She says that rich block play does not just occur. It develops when the adult acts as a powerful catalyst working hard to enable it. So adults are really important to children because they are going to set up the blocks so that they're beautifully presented, so that they're easy to use, so that children have access to them. Because if you've got a disorganised block area, then the block play will be disorganised on a very poor quality. So the role of the adult is really essential in developing high quality block play. So first of all, you need to have a think about setting up your block area. And the block area really needs to be providing adequate space for children to build their blocks, preferably a self-contained space. So when I first started with block play, the area that I had designated was a kind of passageway for children to move through to get to our library area. So it was actually very frustrating because children's models were getting knocked down as children moved through the space, and children didn't feel very safe. And as we observed, we found that they really weren't using the block area as well as we'd hoped. So we then moved the blocks into a much more protected area, and we kind of self-contained it on four sides with just a small entrance, which then allowed the children to feel safe and secure, and it helped for models to be made and not to be knocked down, as the area was not a place that children were passing through. So that's one of the important considerations. There then really needs to be a sufficient number and variety of blocks to enable large structures to be built. And obviously, if you've got a large setting with lots of children, then you're going to need more blocks, you're going to need a bigger area than if you have a smaller setting. But it's important that you don't just have 6 unit blocks and 6 pillars. You need lots and lots, particularly of unit and half unit blocks, the triangle blocks, a good number of those, so that you can provide lots of opportunities for children to build big structures, or for multiple children to be building structures at the same time. Obviously, you are going to be limited by space, but ideally the different sizes of blocks should be available at all times. So unit blocks, hollow blocks, the large ones and the mini ones, and also the mini unit blocks. It's really important, as we've said before, that these belong to the same system so that they maintain that mathematical relationship. And having these different varieties of blocks gives children the opportunity to be really flexible and imaginative with their play, and to solve lots of problems as they work out how the different systems interact with each other. And the different blocks kind of provide different types of functions. So the larger hollow blocks tend to provide more energetic play. The smaller mini ones, children tend to be more delicate with. So you're really helping children to develop in different aspects by having these different types of blocks available. The blocks should be freely available on a daily basis in open access storage, and that might sound straightforward, but actually lots of settings have got blocks that are in a box with a lid on, perhaps even with a cover over it. That's how the blocks were when I first started working in the nursery, and I thought that was fine. But every time I got the blocks out, the children would tip them out all over the floor. There would be a great hullabaloo. There would be mess everywhere. And we would kind of raise our hands in horror and put them all back in the corner and cover them up again. And what we realised subsequently was that children were really fascinated and excited by the blocks because they were just coming out once or twice a month, maybe sometimes, and they weren't getting that opportunity for daily regular play where they could develop their ideas and not get overexcited about this new resource that they hadn't seen for ages. So it's really important that children can access the blocks, and every block needs its own designated storage space. So in my setting I have open shelves, and I've actually photocopied and laminated the blocks and pasted them onto the shelf so that children know where to return the blocks to after they've played with them. And that really helps. It helps to support and scaffold children, and it helps them to understand the relationship between the different blocks. What's really important is that you place the blocks in a way that children can see which ones are different. So lots of the blocks, if you place them end on, look exactly the same. So it's important that you have enough space that you can turn, for instance, the unit block and the half unit and the double unit block, if they're placed end on, look the same, but if they're turned sideways on, you can really clearly see that mathematical relationship between them. And so it's important that your storage system has that ability to show that modular structure of the blocks and the mathematical relationships. I also have set out the mini hollow blocks in the past, again with little templates where children can put the blocks back. You might find that this is not going to work for your setting. In my current setting, we keep the mini blocks in a basket, and we find that works much better for us. So you also have to think about the children that you have and the space that you have and what might work best for you. So also thinking about the block area, you can also provide other opportunities by providing a variety of different resources for the children. So in order to promote literacy and numeracy, you might think about putting in clipboards, pens and pencils, different types of paper, squared, lined paper. You might put in rulers, tape measures. You might think about having pictures of architects working, for example, or maybe architectural drawings. It's often quite helpful. We have a book which has got photographs of famous buildings, and children are often quite interested in looking at the structures and trying to represent those structures themselves in their own buildings. It's also quite important, I think, to have cameras or iPads available so that children can take photographs of their models. Because models are transitory and they can't always stay up, often people do ask me, do you let the children keep their models up? And I'm in a setting where we're now delivering the 11:40 hours, so children are with us from 9 o'clock till 3 o'clock, so they can leave a model and come back to it later on in the day. But you might be in a setting where you have children in the morning and then a new set of children in the afternoon where that's not possible. So giving the children the opportunity to take photographs of their models helps them to be able to remember them or perhaps revisit their models. I know children who have used the photographs and then rebuilt the model the following day to represent it maybe in more depth or to copy exactly what they did the day before. And one thing that can be quite useful is to have children's names available so that they can put their own name into the block model before they take their photograph. That helps you when you come to print off photographs because you know whose model belonged to whom. And also it can be useful, for instance, if children maybe don't want to leave their block play to go to the toilet or to have snack, if there's a system where they can put their name on their model and that tells other children that they're going to be returning, then it gives them a bit more freedom to go and do those other things and then come back to their block building. So when you're setting up the block area, it's important to really think about returning the materials to the shelves. And we talk about returning the blocks rather than tidying up, because tidying up feels very much like the end of something and now we're not going to be playing here anymore. Whereas returning is part of an ongoing process of keeping the block area in a good and manageable way for children to come in and out of. So if there's lots and lots of blocks all over the floor, it becomes unsafe. Children can't walk to where they want to go. So returning the blocks is a really important part of block play. And it does help children to kind of play better, I think, because they can still see blocks on the shelves and they know they can choose which ones they want to use in their play. I think it's really important to think about developing rules with children. And obviously each individual setting will, and each individual group of children will think about rules in different ways. But I think it's important to think about with the children what the block area is for. Is it only used for building, or are other activities allowed in the block area? That can be quite an interesting discussion with the children. Should the blocks stay in the block area? As we've said before, is it going to work if all the blocks are inside the washing machine or down the bottom of the garden? Can we knock down models? That's always a really interesting question to discuss with children. Children love knocking down their models, and it's a really exciting and fun part of block play. But it's not so much fun if someone comes along and knocks down your model when you've not given them permission to do so. So often children will generate their own ideas around that, and I know I've certainly had children who have made agreements that it's fine to knock down your own model, or if you ask permission from somebody else, then and they say yes, then you can knock down their model. So that's an interesting one to think about. The other role of the adult is in providing accessories. And when we looked at the developmental stages of block play, we looked at providing accessories for children round about stage 4 or stage 5 of block building. And that's really because the accessories can often take over the block play. So if children are quite immature block players, then they might become more interested in a basket of cars than they are in building itself. Now, I know that that can be quite tricky when you're in a mixed age setting, and so it's worth thinking about how you might be presenting the accessories and what accessories you're providing. So often the more open-ended accessories are probably, I would say, more successful because particularly animals, wild animals or farm animals or cars, which are much more closed materials, can actually take over the block play, and it just becomes about lions fighting in a zoo or cars brooming up and down a road, and the children rather abandon the block play and kind of forget about it. The most creative play really does come from those open-ended materials, so loose parts. As I've said before, I think scarves can be really helpful. I've had some really interesting play where just by chance we put some red scarves and blue scarves and black scarves into a box, and the children used the red scarf, waving it over the building to delineate fire, and they were shouting, "Fire, fire, the building's on fire." Somebody came along dressed as a fireman and used the blue scarf, and this was the water putting out the fire, and then they draped the black scarf over the charred embers of their burnt building. So you can see how just by having those scarves there, that imaginative play developed. Children often like to use small world figures in their block play, so they will often act out stories, and particularly if you are a setting that tells lots of repetitive stories, you'll find children will be acting out those stories within their block play. Often they'll use smaller loose parts such as perhaps glass gems or beads or little wood cookies in sort of patterning within their block play or inside enclosures. So it's good to have quite a variety of different types and sizes of accessories available. So as I've said, we want to be making those accessories available to extend children who are at stage 4 or onwards of their modelling. And it's important that the accessories are relevant to the block play. So I think it's really useful to use your observations of what you're seeing the children's interests are, and providing opportunities for extending the block play with accessories that support that. But if children's interests are, it might be dinosaurs, which can be very fascinating to a lot of children. If those interests are really overtaking the block play, it might be that you think about moving those items to a different part of the nursery for children to play with, so that the block play is still the primary focus of the play in the block area. It's important for children to have lots and lots of experiences with blocks and then add in the accessories. And it's absolutely fine to have blocks with no accessories. And quite often I will do that in my setting. We'll just take the accessories away for a while. And you quite often will see quite a significant shift in the complexity of the play that the children are developing because they're not distracted by other materials and they're really focused on the blocks. So as I've said, observe the play and find the accessories that are really going to move it on to the higher level. So finally in this section, we're going to have a think about risk assessment. And that's a really important part of block play. Block play can concern people because it does allow children to explore risk. But as Friedrich Froebel said, a child who lacks experience will not know his capabilities and is more likely to encounter danger. So children need these opportunities to explore in a safe environment, things that are risky, that maybe they find difficult. But if you support children in that, then you'll find that they develop their skills and their problem solving and their way of thinking through issues. And they will get much, much more skilled at that. I know that quite often when I'm doing this training with groups of people, one of the questions that frequently comes up is about building blocks, and often settings have a rule in their setting about not building higher than shoulder height. And I always kind of say that, you really have to know your children, and that's what's really important about risk assessment. It's not about having one rule that fits all. You might have really, really experienced children in your setting who are very safe with their block play. They can manage their own bodies physically in the space. They're not going to barge in and knock down very high models. Or you might have children who lack a lot of coordination, who don't really have much concept of safety, who are going to knock down anything. So you really have to think about the children that you have and what their capabilities are. If you're lying down on the floor and the model is only shoulder height and it falls down and bumps you on the head, that's going to be just as sore and perhaps do just as much damage as a much, much taller building that falls on the head of somebody who's standing. So it might be that one of the rules is that when we're building tall buildings, we don't lie down on the floor, or we make sure we have our shoes on. It really, really depends on your individual setting. Another question that quite often comes up is about gunplay, and we all know that children will create guns from anything that they can get their hands on, sticks, or even just using their fingers. And the block that's the sort of half arch block is very indicative of a gun to lots and lots of children. And I think it's really important that if that's the kind of play that you see emerging, that you have a think about why that play is emerging, what it's about, and allow children to explore that aspect of their interest. I often recommend that people look at Penny Holland's book, We Don't Play with Guns Here. It's a really helpful book that helps you to kind of really work through and think through why children might be wanting to explore gunplay. And I think if we just automatically say, no, you can't do that, that's not for that, we don't have guns here, it shuts children down. It tells them that this thing that they're interested in is not important to you, that they shouldn't be doing it. And I think we all probably know that they will go underneath the bar anyway, and you'll find children doing it, holding the block like a gun and saying it's a water sprayer or a magic ray machine, but they know fine that they're just saying that to keep you off their back. So there's a whole lot in there, and it might be as a team it's something that you want to discuss. I would say in my setting it really comes and goes, that it depends very much on the children, that sometimes I stand in the block area with children and structures, holding the structures, asking children, is this safe? Do you think this is safe? It feels very wobbly, and really helping them to think through, rather than just going in and saying, this is wobbly, you need to take it down. Helping them to think through why something might not be safe and how they can maybe make something more safe. Again, with the gunplay, it's about having those conversations. Why are the children doing this? How can we work with them? How can we explore what it is that they're doing within the play? So this is probably a good opportunity for you to have a look at the video that we have sitting alongside this resource of children exploring risk within their block play. And I would suggest that perhaps it's really useful to reflect on that and discuss what your own thoughts and feelings are about what you're seeing in the video. If we don't give children these opportunities and these experiences, and we limit their block play to our arbitrary limits, then we have to ask, when are they going to be able to learn how they can make their own risk assessments in their play? So finally, we have some reflective questions for you to have a think about the block play provision that you have. So do you have enough blocks or different types of blocks for children to build with? How are your blocks set out? Can children see that modular structure of the blocks and the mathematical relationship between them? Do the accessories that you provide relate to your observations of play? Do they extend the learning or do they limit it? And how do you enable children to take risks in their block play?